everybody, thanks for checking out this video on G4G. Here on YouTube, I'm your host, Napalm Dawn, and today we are going to go over the top 5 most impactful blasters of all time, and the background soundtrack is brought to you by The Division, Tom Clancy's The Division OST. So let's get right into it by discussing one of the most important blasters, and then we'll go ahead and sandwich its others. So, one of the most important blasters of all time, and certainly one of the most unique passives, is going to be Rocket Raccoon. Now, before we get into this, remember this is for PvP, not general Marvel Avengers Alliance. So Rocket Raccoon has been one of the most important PvP blasters due to the fact that he is able to do so much in combat. His biggest thing is that he is able to follow up on people's follow-ups and counters, and that puts him in a fairly unique class along with a few other people such as Spider-Man Noir and Union Jack. Rocket Raccoon is just one of those extremely powerful initiators. He's able to do his own now that he can use the hair trigger ISO, as any of his single target gun attacks can also go ahead and proc his own follow-ups and set up other people. Now he comes in a blaster flavor and a generalist flavor and another blaster flavor. The generalist one is certainly doing quite well thanks to the fact that it is able to do the guaranteed crits the way that his blaster uniform can do, especially at 15, and he doesn't present the weakness to tacticians. However, tacticians are not really that strong in the meta that you have to walk around them. Plus, in his original bellhop uniform over here, he can equip 2 ISOs, such as phased frequencies and his personal one, or any of the gun-related ones, such as hair, trigger, grit, etc. He's definitely a little on the fragile side, but what he does well, and he's extremely glass cannony at times. His Kerplowy is often rarely ever used, but shouldn't be underestimated, and probably going to excessively be used when Rocket Raccoon is used on offense. It just doesn't show up that often on defense. So, moving on, we will touch upon Amazing Spider-Girl. She was very, very strong, but her time in the sun was extremely short-lived. So, she was pretty big, pretty much in either one of her blaster uniforms, but not so much the Scrapper. You have Amazing Spider-Girl, which is the alt, and Amazing Spider-Woman, which is the original that can equip 2 ISOs. She was extremely strong when her impact webbing was up every round, and her web slingshot was also much better. Magnetic maneuver was subtle, so it wouldn't proc tacticians, and she was able to just get tons and tons and tons of extra turns. She was even quite obnoxious on defense. However, she's taken too big of a hit and has basically been written out of the meta. However, when she was around, she was extremely obnoxious, as her own dodging passers would allow her to walk right past any other rules in the game, such as staggered from the Scroll of Rudamaroth. Now let's go ahead and dip down way back to the beginnings of a lot of people's careers, and that is Human Torch. So back in the day, both his stock uniform and his Annihilus uniform were extremely popular. His Annihilus uniform has all the benefits of the original plus the Cosmic Control Rod. And, you know, this is also his future Foundation suit. Human Torch is nowhere in any of the more recent and popular metas, but definitely people spend quite an excessive amount of time working with Human Torch when they first get started in the game. His blazing speed is one of the best passives early on, and it makes him extremely tough to hit. And also, one of the longest battles you will ever have in this game is Human Torch versus Human Torch fights. He's extremely peppy and extremely evasive, and like I said, nowhere near as important nowadays. But he certainly was pretty big back in the day. So for our first three, we've taken a look at Rocket Raccoon and Human Torch and Amazing Spider-Girl. So now let's go ahead and move on to number 2. We are going to talk about Angrier. Now, Angrier is one of these kind of like split personality characters. He's a fairly powerful infiltrator, especially when running with the covert ISO, thanks to the fact that he can spam Soulbreaker. But he actually does that enough on his own, even if he is not an infiltrator. That makes him a fairly strong blaster. All of the worthy have definitely enjoyed PvP power spikes, with the exception of potentially Skrin and Nurkod. It seems that She-Hulk and Nurkod just don't do quite as well in popularity, despite the fact that they're actually very strong. But Angrier, much like Kurth and Null, is definitely enjoying quite the power spike. He is very powerful and very popular. One of the problems is he's taken a little bit of a nerf last season, during Season 30, and that is where a bunch of his summon attacks were not quite as useful as they were. The chance of getting the purged has gone down extensively, and on defense, the only thing he really does right now seems to be summoning the Dominatrix and then going right into Cloaked Lost Souls. If somebody's hurt, he acts like Hafe and goes to Twisted Flames. He's gotten extremely predictable, and the AI is not quite as annoying with him as it used to be. He's still probably going to be quite powerful, what with his anti-magic nature and everything, but he's certainly not as powerful as he was a season or two ago. And then finally, one of the last blasters that we are going to talk about is Havok. Havok, all time, one of the most strongest blasters in PvP since he was around. He is an extremely good pressure point setup person with plasma spheres. It hits everybody, and it actually shuts down his counterclass. Mind you, for all the time that he existed and was strong in PvP, there was no way of avoiding exhaustion. We didn't have ISOs that prevented against it. We didn't have suits that prevented against it. He was so strong for a long time, he was basically running around unchecked, one-shotting people in the first round thanks to a channel energy and plasma wave. Also, at the time, being unstunnable removed kicks like a mule. However, the game caught up to him and basically knocked him down a few pegs. Plasma wave starts, actually, it is the channel energy starts cooldown, and Plasma Wave has no way of avoiding the kicks like a mule, except finally he got an A ISO that prevents against it. It causes an extra cooldown, which isn't really too bad, because he can just go back to spamming Plasma Spheres, and his highly underrated Shattering Punch. He really is nowhere in the meta now, thanks to having Radiation tagged to so many of abilities, and Curse basically, like lol, laugh at the Radiation over here, means Havok is just not welcome in PvP anymore. If there ever was a time that Kurth begins to fade, Havok is definitely going to make a reappearance. He's extremely strong and a really, really good setup for Paragon exploiters. Plus, when Pesty became super popular, Heroic Age Havok and Mockingbird was considered the anti-Pesty team, because even though Pesty was generally a tactician, the exhaustion shut him down, and then he would just one-shot somebody after that. So let's move on to some honorable mentions. We have to throw an honorable mention at Age of Ultron Blaster Quicksilver. Personally, never one of my favorites in Quicksilver. I think his stock suit and his Bisquick, the Scrapper Blue Suit Quicksilver, probably did way more damage and were way more popular than the Age of Ultron version. However, the Age of Ultron version, a little while back, started getting considerably more popular thanks to his Protect passive and his anti-melee passive. I never really found him to be as strong as his Quicksilver Brothers costumes and whatnot. And if you are running a tactician agent, this Quicksilver will definitely proc your extra turn, which makes it super, super risky. Some people liked him, and he was popular, but I never really enjoyed him quite that much. Cable was not really ever seen on defense, but a lot of people did Cable on offense thanks to his turn fuckery. His ability to give somebody an extra turn to accelerate something that they do that might be more important than Cable was always pretty strong. You never really saw him on defense, although he's actually fairly obnoxious on defense because he often tends to do his little silence passive over here. And he's actually not too bad nowadays thanks to his mental resilience, but Emma's really been knocked out, so there's not too much reason to go with him anymore. Nico was extremely popular back during the Pesty era. Nico was used with Pesty basically because Pesty's presence on the field ensures that Nico could do everything she needs to do, and that is set up tons of dots and then go ahead and exploit them with rock and roll. She got really obnoxious in the long game because sometimes it was tough to remember what exactly she had done. But believe it or not, her fallback onto her witch arm, especially once people got Bane on them already, is really, really good. Plus, she has an entire round of immunity while she is rezzing. Her res is a little bit different than other people. It's not that you immediately come back but then can be immediately killed again. She actually takes a full turn to completely come back, so she's thoroughly immune to everything until the resurrection finally completes. Despair and Fatal Strike, however, eliminate that, but she was quite obnoxious for a really, really long time. Unfortunately, we cannot really talk about Beta Ray Bill because he uses bruiser ISOs, so he doesn't count. Another fairly strong one was Elsa, but much like Spider-Girl, unfortunately short-lived. She enjoyed her time in the sun back before the Deb came around. Once the Deb came around, Elsa, thanks to a lot of her gun attacks, began to get shut down. Since she is never ever subtle, except for tea time, she's still a victim of the Deb, but she can at least walk around protectors because you could just jack her up with all the stealthy ISOs. She was very good when everything was bruiser heavy and anti-melee. That's why she got so incredibly popular. But once the Deb came around, the Deb shut her down pretty nicely. Electro doesn't really deserve a spot on the countdown or an honorable mention, but I do want to say, God, I hope he becomes popular with people. He's just so strong, and if you aren't enjoying Electro's power, you're definitely missing out. So guys, there is the top most impactful blasters in PvP's history. I really hope you enjoyed the video, and definitely stay tuned to the channel because I'm going to be doing something new, a new series that I've been going through. So I've done the top most impactful gear and the top most impactful heroes of all time, and then heroes divided by class per PvP. Well, I have a new series idea coming that is going to start this week, so definitely keep a watch on the channel for that. And I'm nearing 1,000 subscribers, so when that happens, I'll be doing a video that tackles that subject. So guys, I really hope you enjoyed this video, and that wraps up the top most impactful heroes. We've done tacticians and bruisers and blasters and generalists and infiltrators and scrappers. We're on the final one. Yay for progress. See you, everybody.